a work of immense passion, and also for us something that's really interesting and exciting, because this is part of a bigger project called the Bangalore Area Science Hub, or BASH. And we wanted to bring science down to the people, down to the layman, to make them interested and engaged in the science that we all love and we enjoy pursuing. So we decided to do a virtual exhibition about one theme, and that is scales. Scales going from micro to macro, from the tiny subatomic particles to the universe itself. And we talk about multiple things. If you were to go to the website cosmic-zoom.in, you would see the plethora of different themes that we are trying to take. And one of those themes is insects. And we all know about insects. They're obviously one of the multitude of organisms that live on Earth. And one of the most interesting insects is the honeybee. We have all seen a honeybee. All know honeybee. Literally, if you see a golden hexagon, we know what animal is responsible for it. There is not a person who doesn't know how a honeybee looks like. But there are very few people who know almost everything there is to be about a honeybee. As the Americans would say, he is the bee's knees when it comes to honeybees. And that is Professor Axel Brockmann. Now, we are honored to have Axel along with us. And let me just give you a small introduction about the man himself. He obtained his PhD at the Brain Research Institute at the University of Bremen, Germany, on anatomical studies on the olfactory system of honeybees. He was in part of the Department of Behavioral Physiology and Sociobiology, headed by Professor Bert Dobler. And at that time, that department was one of the world leaders in the study of social insects, focusing on ants and honeybees, where Professor Axel performed behavioral experiments on pheromone communication and dance behavior, something that I am very interested in. If I'm not wrong, it's about bees waggling their butts. Now, that's very interesting. Then Professor Brockmann worked in the lab of Professor Gene E. Robinson from the University of Illinois, where he performed studies on the molecular underpinnings of dance behavior. Since 2012, we have been honored and privileged to have him as a full time associate professor at NCBS, where his lab studies molecular mechanisms underlying dance behavior and time memory, and in recent years, comparative research on Asian honeybees. So that is Professor Axel, and I have no more to say than to say the stage is all yours, Professor.
Uh, yeah, good evening. And Bertie, thank you very much for your kind introduction. Let me kind of just, I have to share my screen. And yeah, so then I'm starting. Good evening. As Bertie said, my lab works on two different areas. One is trying to understand what's happening in the brain when the bees are doing complex behavior, like dance communication or time memory. And uh, the other project is studying Asian honeybees. And this evening, I want to talk about one of the Asian honeybees, about Apis dorsata. And Apis dorsata is very familiar to Indians because you see it in your daily life. Apis dorsata, for example, here on the right photos, they are kind of nesting on balconies. They're nesting on balconies because under natural conditions, they're nesting in trees, as you can see on the left photo, and they're nesting at cliffs and overhangs. So balconies, and particularly balconies of high-rise buildings, are actually attractive nesting sites for Apis dorsata. So we find in a city like Bangalore, we find a lot of Apis dorsata colonies in apartment buildings, and this balconies and of apartment buildings, and this leads also to kind of a human-animal conflict that is not much talked about. But I mean, we know about human-tiger kind of conflict, human-elephant conflicts, but honeybee-human conflict is not really kind of a topic in public. In public, honeybees are actually, those honeybees that are nesting at the balconies are kind of viewed by most of the people as an annoyance and that they want to get rid of. And so you are basically allowed to call pest management and kill the colonies that are nesting on your balcony. this is kind of like in contrast to that, actually Apis dorsata is a very important animal for pollination. And and I want to kind of introduce this animal that you kind of see and might be kind of afraid of from a different perspective. I kind of have decided to, my talk is divided in three parts. At the beginning, I will tell you a little bit about basics of bee biology. Then I will talk why honeybees, or particularly honeybees, are interesting to scientists. And the third is I want to talk to you about a project where we are observing the annual life cycle of Apis dorsata. So not if we look at the scientific literature on honeybees, 90% to 95% of the scientific literature is on this honeybee species called Apis mellifera. That is the so-called Western honeybee, which has a distribution in Europe and Africa. And all the other species are in Asia, and we only know very little. As I said, 5% of the literature is about all the other bee species in Asia. So actually, we see these animals in our daily life, but we do not know much about the biology. And particularly, we do not know much about the basic biology. And if we accept that we have to kind of conserve these animals because they are important for pollination, we have to kind of study the basic biology. And that is kind of like, that's not rocket science, but it has to be done. And the last chapter kind of my talk will go into that research. It is true, everyone knows bees, but actually many people don't know that there are so many different kind of bees. Worldwide, we think there are about 20,000 bee species. And honeybees is a specific group of kind of about 15 species. And in India, we have about 800 bee species, and 40% is endemic. It means kind of like only existing in India. And in India, we have also 7 honeybee species. You have to kind of, I'm coming from Germany, and in Germany, we have only 1 honeybee species. So India is probably one of the countries with the highest bee diversity. On the left side, you see a picture of the diversity of bees in North America. Unfortunately, we don't have a picture like this for India, but you can see that you have kind of like very tiny bees and very big bees. And most of these bees are solitary. So, and they are so tiny, so you kind of like hardly see them. Only if you kind of like watch a flower, then you can see those bees. You also have in India bees that are in this big size, for example, the carpenter bees. And dorsata is also a large one, but a smaller, but the waist is tinier. Here is a picture that shows you to the left all the different honeybee species that you find in India. And let's start with these 3 in the middle. So there we have Apis dorsata, where you see kind of like a dorsata colony in this picture on the right side, nesting on a balcony. Apis dorsata is a giant honeybee, and then we have Apis cerana. Apis cerana is a cavity nesting species. So it's nesting in tree trunks. And in a city like Bangalore, you can also find them in lampposts. And so they are kind of like not very choosy about where they are nesting. And then we have Apis florea, which is actually the cutest of the bees. It's like a little bit reddish. And it builds kind of like small combs. And because it's small and has a small comb, it nests in bushes and trees, kind of like hidden in vegetation. And you hardly see them. and you can pass by without seeing them. Now, these three species are occurring all over India, and it might be that even dorsata and serrana are occurring in two species, the northern apistosata and the southern apistosata. This is why I said there are 7 honeybee species. So apistosata has a sister species, that is Apis laboriosa, that's only occurring in the Himalayas, and it can kind of like build nests up to kind of like 3,000 meters. And this is the largest bee, but it's only occurring in the Himalayas. And then we have a sister species to Apis florea, Apis andreniformis, that occurs mainly in Southeast Asia. In the most northern distribution, it has in the Northeast region, for example, in Mizoram. And it is, although Apis florea occurs everywhere, Apis andreniformis probably is more like a forest bee, and it is even more hidden. And then in addition to these native species, we have Apis mellifera, the western honeybee, kind of imported to India. And it is mainly kept by beekeepers and used for honey production. So when you ask Indians what are honeybees good for, then they tell you it's for honey. But it's not true. So so the one thing is that so the most important, also economically important factor of honeybees is pollination. Honeybee is something where humans can make money with, and India, production of honey in India is not, basically Indians don't eat honey. Honey is used in the Western world like jam, as a kind of like a spread for eating to on bread, or kind of like sweetening things. And actually in India, honey is not much important for the daily usage. And so the honey that is produced in India is mainly exported to the Western world. So, and the Modi government, for example, also supports production of honey for farmers. I mean, kind of as an economic support, because you can earn money with honey. But the honey is then exported. And India is among the 10 highest exporting honey countries. But even also in the US, honey is not the thing. The most important thing is pollination. Pollination for industrious food production. So, and here you see, and of course, honeybees are not the only pollinators. There are lots of different kinds of pollinators. And here you see a study that was done in Bangkok about, so the researchers kind of looked at a different kind of flowers and kind of like noted down by which kind of pollinators these flowers were visited. This is then a so-called pollination network. And you see that kind of like, all these are kind of different species, but kind of like, how to say, the major impact on pollination of these plant species are by kind of like honeybees, Apis florea, Apis dorsata, Apis cerana, and stingless bees. Stingless bees are also kind of social bees, and kind of like they are a little bit overrepresented here because the people cannot identify the species. So this could be kind of 3 or 4 species even. So what you see that kind of like honeybees and stingless bees are general pollinator, and so have a kind of strong impact on pollination of the plants. And with that, for example, for food production. Unfortunately, such a study does not exist for India. I know that a colleague at Atri is starting to do, or is preparing a study of that on Bangalore. And I think it's very important to have that, to demonstrate that, for example, Apis dorsata is an important pollinator. My lab, what my lab did was, don't go into the details how we did it. We kind of like generated a foraging map for kind of Florea colonies, Serrana colonies, and dorsata colonies. And here you can kind of see kind of like the foraging map built onto a Google picture. And the yellow dots show kind of like places where dorsata is searching for food. So different from Florea and Serrana, dorsata actually kind of collects food and in that sense makes pollination service on a larger area than the two other species. That Apis dorsata is only kind of like here appearing as kind of like lesser important than Apis florea and Apis serrana, has something to do that Apis dorsata is not occurring evenly distributed over the city area. Apis dorsata colonies tend to aggregate. So what we have is a patchy distribution of these species. And in the study, also at some kind of research sites, there were no Apis dorsata at all. So it could be that the importance of Apis dorsata here is a little bit underestimated. Second, this is of course a snapshot, and kind of the visitation rate kind of changes with season. So this is the area, kind of like, for the people that knows, this is a GKVK area, and this is NCBS campus. And after having this foraging map, we were looking kind of like which landscape the bees prefer. And so we categorized the landscape as urban, semi-natural habitats, garden, agriculture, and water. And here you see on the right a table of the results, and kind of just look at the green columns. This is a this is a foraging area, kind of like in gardens. So how to say? So we find the bees foraging more in gardens than in all the other kind of 3 different landscapes that we have identified. This is an interesting result. It is actually very similar to what was found for the Western honeybee in Europe. It means that garden areas and kind of city garden areas are highly attractive for these bees. And that likely because gardening leads to the fact that you have rich flowering plants and a diversity of flowering plants. Agricultural kind of used landscape is kind of like if you have, for example, a sunflower cultivation is only flowering once 14 days or a month. And then that land is not used anymore. So, and whereas in gardens, you always have kind of flowering plants available. So maybe counterintuitive for the lay person is that cities might be highly attractive for pollinators instead of certainly they are better than agricultural use, and maybe they are even better than natural habitats. So to conclude this introductory session, what some take-home messages: Apis dorsata and all other pollinators, insect pollinators, are important wildlife. And kind of like how to say, I'm really emphasizing this, that most people in India, when they think about wildlife, they think about rhinos, they think about elephants, they think about tigers, and that is the beauty. Of course, these animals are beauty and fascinating, but how to say, the insects and also kind of like honeybees are very interesting, and it is wildlife. It is wildlife that is beneficial for humans, and it's wildlife that needs to be conserved. Pollination is important for our own food requirements and food production, but it's also important for the ecosystems because pollination is essential for the reproduction of plants. If you don't have pollinators, the plants can't reproduce. Garden areas with lots of different flowering plants are attractive for bees, as are high-rise buildings, which are similar to cliffs. I think it's totally necessary that we have to conserve apistosata, and the important first step of the conservation of these important honeybees is to stop to treat them as pest insects. Kind of like it kind of, or more clearly, it has to stop the killing of honeybee colonies in the cities. 1 out of 5 honeybee species can be used for beekeeping, and that's Apis cerana. Because of this, most agricultural universities focus their research on Apis cerana, and sometimes they do even studies on Apis mellifera. This has to be changed. We have to understand all the wild honeybees, and of course, all pollinators, but how to say, we have to kind of, as a honeybee biologist, studies on honeybees in agricultural universities should kind of start studying the wild honeybees. So that is that's the end of my first part. Bertie, are there any questions?
As of now, none, Professor. The introduction hasn't got any questions as of now. But if there are any, I will let you know.
Okay. Well, then I'm going on. Why are honeybees interesting to scientists? So this goes back to this person, Karl von Frisch, who's a kind of German-Austrian researcher. And Karl von Frisch used honeybees to identify capabilities of the sensory system and the brain. And for example, in 1914, more than 100 years ago, Karl von Frisch used behavioral experiments with honeybees to demonstrate that insects have color vision. At that time, physiologists were denying that insects have color vision because it was clear that color vision is generated in the brain. And it's not kind of like how to say, what you see as a color is not just a reproduction of what is outside. It is generated from the brain. And kind of like people thought that insects are kind of too small creatures, that they have a brain that is generating a sensation. And then in the 1920s, Karl von Frisch and his students demonstrated that honeybees have a way to communicate navigational information. The dance language, it is, I will show you a dance later. So it's important to understand that so honeybees are navigating to a food source, and the returning foragers that had found a valuable food source can communicate the distance and the direction of that food source to the nestmate. So that is why I'm telling you it's kind of they are communicating navigational information. And then in 1929, with behavioral experiments, Karl von Frisch groups demonstrated that bees have have time memory. This was again the first time for all animals that it was demonstrated that animals have time memory. And then kind of like how to say, they kind of demonstrated sky polarization. I don't want to go landmark counting. 2 years ago, someone demonstrated that honeybees have a concept of zero, which also went through all the newspapers. But I want to kind of like make a point that dance language, time memory. No, let's, sorry. So Carl von Frisch, and so to give you an idea about the importance, Carl von Frisch, for his studies on honeybees, got a Nobel Prize together with Karl Lorenz and Tinbergen, because kind of like these three kind of established behavioral science as a kind of like hardcore scientific research. And as I and here on the right side, I have Nobel Prizes in the last 10 years. The one was going to Jim O'Keefe and the Mosers for identifying in the rat brain a system that is representing the place where the animal is in the environment, like a GPS in your car, and which is important for navigation, and kind of like how to say, you have to, so rats can navigate, but you have to compare it that the dance language is even kind of like a system that's even higher development. It's not that they can navigate. No, they even can communicate this navigation information to the nestmates. And the same is in 2017, a molecular biologist working on Drosophila got a Nobel Prize for identifying the cellular mechanisms for the circadian rhythm. And kind of like how to say, this research was actually started in 1929, kind of by kind of demonstrating that honeybees have a sense of time. That people didn't get, that researchers working on honeybees didn't get a Nobel Prize for these things is because honeybees are very good to do behavioral experiments, but they are not so easy to deal with when you want to kind of record from the brain, or when you want to go for molecular mechanisms in the brain. For this kind of rats and Drosophila have been more successful, but okay, so I'm sorry here. So what I would say, so honeybees are very important for basic research on animal behavior. So, so the question is now regarding apistosata. Does apistosata kind of like show some interesting behavior for the scientists? That is interesting for identifying basic kind of mechanisms of animal behavior. And in my opinion, there are, at the moment, I would say we know of three. And the one thing is that the unique behavior is that these colonies aggregate, and these apistosata colonies have preferred nesting sites. Preferred nesting sites is actually also kind of that problem with about human and human bee conflict. So if, so for example, in my apartment complex, we have 14 to 16 honeybee colonies. And the interesting thing is that the colonies are kind of like always only, so to say, they are always nesting at the same sites. And it is independent of whether it's the same colony, because we know that also kind of because once the colony was killed, and then a few months later at that same site, a new colony nested. Apistosata colonies are very picky about where they are building their nests, and kind of like how to say, so they have preferred nesting sites. We don't know why that is, or how they do that. And for the human-animal conflict, it is important because those people that are killing a colony and removing a colony from their balcony, they will have a few months later another colony on their balcony with kind of like high probability. Then the other interesting behavior that has also to do with human-animal conflict is that different from all the other honeybee species, apistosata can kind of fly during nights. So it forages and it dances during full moon nights. And the human-animal conflict is that in a summer night, you are opening your balcony doors and kind of like honeybee foragers are coming, get attracted from the light inside the apartment and kind of like get caught by the light and are flying around the light source, which kind of makes humans afraid. So how to say, but they have the capability to fly at low light conditions. And third, apistosata are certainly doing seasonal migrations, similar to birds, similar to butterflies. And they do this similar seasonal migration during the monsoon. And that is an interesting innate behavior that is particularly in the recent years, people started to study the brain and molecular mechanisms underlying kind of seasonal long-term migrations. Now, as you know, so the question is how to study and how to observe. The first question is how to study and how to observe honeybee, apistosata colony. And there, in principle, are two ways. One is you kind of like get access to the balcony or kind of like the place where the colony is nesting. Then here's a student of mine from Germany who smoked a colony and is kind of putting in thermosensors into the colony to kind of measure temperatures. And here we have a camera to observe the colony. So that is one way. You try to observe them where they nest, where they build their nest, or you try to kind of remove, collect the nest and bring it to a place kind of here on the roof at NCBS, where you kind of like put it in a kind of half open box. This kind of gives you easier access to the colony. You can even kind of like go, I mean, here you can also go close, but it's easier to do it here, and you kind of can set up all your camera. Here the camera is setting is kind of attached to the wall, which is kind of would be easier here. You just need a tripod. Unfortunately, if you collect a colony and bring it and kind of house it like this, the colonies do not stay long. Kind of, we were kind of like, we had only colonies staying for 4 weeks. And again, this can have something to do that they are very picky about the nesting site. And so they don't like this, what we are providing them. So we are basically not doing this anymore, and we are trying to get access to balconies where we can kind of access the colony and kind of can attach cameras. Here, and what I want to kind of show you is data about foraging, daily foraging activity and night foraging activity. This is a study by Alison Young, also a foreign student intern in my lab. She's from Michigan State University in the US. This is the administration building of NCBS, and here's a colony, which kind of like you can see here. It's a quite large colony, and she has a camera that she has kind of like puts here to record the activity of kind of landing and leave and departing activity, and also the dance activity of that colony. So one study that Ellison did was to record the night activity over a lunar cycle. And here you see different days of the lunar cycle starting on January 21st, 2019, from January to February. And so this indicates the full moon. Gray is a night time. Blue is a twilight, and kind of the white is a daytime. So, and you can see here, and then the x-axis gives arrivals per minute. So you see here in the full moon, kind of the colony is quite active during the whole night. Even kind of like if a quarter of the moon kind of it's still active, and even at half moon, the colony is still active in the night. And then this reduces when it comes to close to full to new moon. Then you see still the activity in the twilight, see activity during the day, but not during the night. And then kind of like, so here you see half moon condition where they're not flying much during the night. And here you see half moon condition where they are kind of flying, foraging a lot in the night. So, so this is kind of like basic data that haven't been kind of demonstrated in that detail before. So this is one lunar cycle. She did, I think, 2 or 3 lunar cycles. And this picture here shows you kind of like the average activity during on the different days of the lunar cycle of kind of 2 or 3 lunar cycles. And if you look at the mean arrival rate, then it's clearly blue means twilight. So these apistosata are actually highly active in twilight. That means, so in twilight. And then they are kind of lesser active during the day and kind of like a low activity during the night, except for kind of like almost full moonlit nights where the ambient kind of light is sufficient that they can fly. So the species is actually not diurnal, it's crepuscular and diurnal. And my colleague Hema Somanathan from ISA Trivandrum kind of looked at the eyes and the ocella. And here you see a photo from Hema's group that shows the worker head. You see the eyes and you see these ocelli. These ocelli are kind of bigger than in the other honeybee species, and the eyes are bigger in the other honeybee species. And kind of like these kind of like protruded ocelli are actually a characteristic for nocturnal animals. But kind of how to say, the eyes and the ocelli of these bees are not as sensitive as those of clearly nocturnal animals. And Hema and the collaborators suggested that in addition to the eyes and the ocelli, this animal has to have kind of brain processes that is increasing the sensitivity so that it can fly at kind of the low light levels during full moon nights. One has to say, in addition, that because artificial light is increasing in cities like Bangalore, that it could be that in specific conditions, the artificial kind of human light sources like street lights, etc., might kind of like increase the ambient light so that they also can make these bees fly. Now I come to the question of the night dances. And here I have to give a little bit background. So honeybees and other insects, and this figure shows you the desert ants, they use 2 strategies for navigating to food sources and back to the nest. One is that they use landmarks to orient themselves, and the other is that they use a sun compass. The landmarks are here kind of like indicated as these triangles, and that they can learn. And then the sun compass is indicated by the moving sun. So the foragers here first kind of like searches for food in a random kind of search, finds the food, and then runs back in a straight way to the nest. And in this next trip, at the end, or kind of like the bee would fly this vector back again to the food source. And this vector kind of like integration is called path integration, and the direction is kind of based on a sun compass. And the sun compass is kind of the problem. The problem is that the sun is not a stable, fixed kind of position, but it kind of changes over the day. So the animal kind of can learn that in the morning, the sun is to the right of the food source, and in the evening, kind of like the sun is way to the left to the food source. And honeybees can communicate this with the dance behavior. Explain you kind of like the dance behavior. The dance is described, and the next slide shows you dances. But let's give you the theory first. So the bee kind of like does a straight walk, then it turns back and a return walk, and then does a straight walk again, and then it turns left and comes back to the beginning, and then does a straight walk. And this is where she kind of waggles her butt, and the duration of the straight walk correlates with the distance of the food source, and the angle of the straight path with respect to the perpendicular gives the angle of where kind of the food source with respect to the sun. You see it here. This is the tree where the nest is. The flower is here, and the sun is here. And so kind of like at this moment of the day, kind of like the food source is 50 degrees to the right of the sun. And this is what it's also given in this vector. Now, the sun, as I said, moves from the northern hemisphere from east to west over the day. So, and if you are following the dances of bees over the whole day, you see that kind of like they are turning counterclockwise. And if you kind of show the changes in the dance orientation over the day in this diagram, then you can see that kind of like, so how to say, so the sun is in the east, kind of like, so during the morning time, it's always to the, how to say, to the right of the sun. And then around noon, when the sun is in the south and kind of like straight up, kind of the dance orientations are kind of drastically fast changing, and then kind of indicating that is on the other side of the sun. So this to make it clearer, so because of the movement of the sun from the east to the west, this food position with respect to the sun is 180 degrees opposite between morning and afternoon. So, and this is what you are seeing here. So kind of how to say, here basically if you kind of like zero, it's kind of like, so the bee dances that the food source in the morning is in the direction of the sun, it's in the east. And then in the afternoon, when the sun is in the west, it kind of indicates that the food position is opposite. It's in the east, right? And so the bee dances here basically downwards. Yeah. So that you have to kind of like memorize that the sun position is 180 degrees opposite in the afternoon from the morning. And kind of like the bee dances are changing 180 degrees during the day. Now I'm showing you that you see kind of like how the dances are. I show you here, wait a minute, so a day dance. Okay, that is. So here you see the dancing bee. This dancing bee is a pollen forager. You can see the white pollen on the legs. And she is kind of like, how to say, so here during the day, kind of like the food source is kind of like 30 degrees to the left of the sun. And this lower movie shows you a dorsata dance during the night. And it is recorded with an infrared camera, an infrared. See here. So this one is kind of like, but that is just by luck 180 degrees opposite, but it is not the same bee. So we can observe the dances during the day and the night. And now I'm showing you the results of one night. And please kind of listen carefully. And I hope it kind of I'm explaining it clearly. So the gray area is the nighttime. And what we see is that dances, and these are dance, so each dot is a dance orientation of one bee that is dancing. And these bees are not identified individually. So this can be kind of different bees. But what we see is that over the night, particularly if we see this here, apparently kind of the bees are not changing the direction of the dances during the night. Remember, this is the dance recording during the day, kind of, and you saw that it's starting kind of here at around 0 degrees, and then around noon, it's kind of like changing dramatically in a short time. But this is depending on the sun's position, the elevation of the sun, and then in the afternoon, it's 180 degrees. We don't see here in this kind of a change of the orientation. And of course, okay, this is only one observation. So now I want you to look at these phases. So the yellow line gives you the sunset. So the sun is behind the horizon. And the blue line is the beginning of astronomical night. This twilight, during this twilight, the sun is below the horizon, but still sunlight is reaching the sky above the earth. And here now we're seeing, and the red is kind of like the rise of the moon. So, and here we see now something very particularly kind of like very surprising. So at kind of like around kind of like the time of sunset, and unfortunately we don't have the data before that, the bees were dancing kind of like what is that, 160 or 140 or whatever degrees, and then the dance orientation of all the different bees are changing rapidly within 1 hour. And almost they're changing, kind of this difference is almost 180 degrees. The data for the morning sun, for the morning twilight are kind of like a little poor in this collection. but it appears that it is quite similar during the night. So again, I told you that the morning sun is 180 degrees opposite. The position of the morning sun is 180 degrees opposite of the position of the evening sun. And that means kind of like how to say, and because I use the sun as the reference point, kind of the food position is also kind of like with respect to the sun, 180 degrees opposite. So it is clear that somewhere during the night, these bees that are here, that's the evening, kind of like have to change to get kind of like expect kind of like to adjust to the opposite position of the sun. And the hypothesis was that they might doing into midnight, but now our data kind of like these data suggest that they are resetting kind of the compass orientation during the evening twilight. Why this is, we could speculate. This is a first data set. And it was surprising for us that they apparently kind of don't change it during the night, and that we see this change in the orientation. I have to say something more is that I said that the sun is, how to say it, the sun is below the horizon, but there's still sunlight at the sky. And honeybees and other insects don't only use the sun's position, but also the polarization pattern associated with the sun. And so it could be still, so the question was, if this kind of like change in dance orientation, is that kind of induced by that there's something happening at the sky? This is not the position of the sun, but it could be that the sunlight, the polarization pattern of the sky is changing. So it's induced by the polarization pattern. If that is true, we would kind of also kind of hypothesize that we see a similar thing here in the morning twilight. To our luck, there was a study already on the polarization pattern of the twilight phase, and done by physicists, and kind of like how to say, they demonstrated that actually the polarization pattern during the twilight phase is not changing. So our interpretation is that this change in dance orientation is not induced by environmental stimuli, like the position of the sun or the polarization pattern. If that is true, then one has to hypothesize that this is an internally induced process. And as I said, kind of how to say, the bees necessarily need to kind of reset their compass system, because the next morning after waking up, the sun's position is in the opposite direction. And they have to use that for finding the food source. And if they don't do it, they wouldn't find the food source that they have visited the day before. So this was maybe a little bit difficult, kind of like to summarize. Apistosata night dances. Apistosata is day and twilight active and can fly and forage at dim light conditions. It is not nocturnal, it is twilight, and kind of like, and it's kind of like foraging most during the twilight zone. And it kind of, because it's sensitive to fly in twilight, it's also sensitive enough to fly in full moon nights. Apistosata workers do not use the moon. That had been demonstrated before for navigation and for the dance communication. We think that night dance is likely to indicate the food location with respect to the sun's position in the morning. Kind of like they are not changing, they are resetting the compass system during dusk. And then during the night, they are already dancing for the position in the morning. Betty, kind of like this is the end of my second part.
Yes,
Are there
we do have
questions?
a few questions actually. May I? Ah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yes. So let me start from the top. Chandrasekhar asks, so the other four species that are not used for beekeeping, is this because of lack of knowledge?
No, okay. So how to say, beekeeping you can do. Um, so I'm sorry, I didn't explain it. So there are two different types of bee species. One that we are called cavity nesting, and one we call open nesting, like dorsata. The open nesting kind of you hardly can keep them in boxes. The cavity nesting, because they are already kind of like to nest in cavities, you can keep in boxes. And keeping them in boxes means for a human, you can kind of carry them around. You can own them, you carry them around, and you can do beekeeping with them. Yeah.
Okay.
And that is
Uh,
India only Apistosata. Mhm.
and congruent to that, Saptarshi Sarkar from YouTube asks, you said that 1 out of 5 honeybee species are viable for beekeeping. What are the characteristics that make them viable and why?
For beekeeping.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as I said that, so so uh, 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 because they already nest in a cavity and kind of
Yeah.
beekeeping starts that basically in most cultures, right, you find the bees in a tree trunk,
Hmm.
and then you basically chop the tree, right, and then you have them, and then you have kind of like a little part of the tree, kind of like a stump
Yeah.
that you can carry around. So that's the easiest way, and that is in kind of like in the Western world, where there was only a cavity nesting species, that was done and has a huge long tradition, starting even with the Egyptian cultures. Yeah, and you could put them in kind of like how to say, if you can put them in a box, you can carry them around, right? You can bring them to the flowers, and particularly you can own them, and uh, and uh, and these open nesting species, but also Epicurana actually has a way, it also likes to abscond. And this is actually difficult for farmers. So there have been kind of like this state supported giving bee Apistosata colonies in a hive to farmers. But sometimes they are also absconding because they didn't like something. And the Western honeybee is basically bred to kind of stay in the nest box.
Yeah.
So,
Can I?
and everyone knows that dorsata colonies, kind of how to say, uh, most people are afraid of them, right? But then they are kind of like, so what with apis dorsata colonies, the tribal do is they, what we call honey hunting. Yeah. So you don't do anything with the bees, but you know where the bees are, and then you are climbing the tree, and then you're smoking them, and you are collecting the honey.
Can I just quickly add that
Yeah.
there is a loan and subsidies for beekeeping, that is apiculture, under the Prime Minister Employment Scheme. So the government of India actually gives 10 lakhs to start beekeeping as a full-time business. That's just extra information if anybody's interested.
Yeah, so that is uh, um, it's called the Sweet Revolution, right? And it's
Yeah.
supported by the Kadi. I mean, I don't know these names, and
Mhm.
this is particularly to produce honey and give extra money to young farmers to
Yeah.
get more money. And this is that's so it's important. This is an economic initiative. Yeah. So as I said, so look, I mean, we have at least 5 species, and one species is supported. That's Apis and Apis is supported for honey production. And people that are beekeepers and they want to produce honey, they particularly go to planta, kind of like agricultural sites because there are then a lot of flowers, and they can get a lot of honey in a short time. But the agricultural production in India is based on many small farmers, and these small farmers don't have kind of like grow and they don't even know who is pollinating these plants. And there's it could be that Apis dorsata is important and Apis florea is important. Yeah. So it's two different pairs of shoes, the one of honey production and the one of pollination. Yeah. And for agricultural production, we need pollination. And kind of like how to say, if we have at least 5 honeybee species, kind of like not the one Apis cerana is doing the job. It's the others that are important for the job too. And because you cannot own them and easily make money with that, so no one is interested. And actually, in my opinion, there needs to be a support for these other honeybee species and of course other pollinators, but the honeybees importantly, for kind of maintaining the agricultural production. Yeah.
Okay. Chandrasekhar has an interesting question. Can an individual bee change its colony and be part of another, like an extended family? And because they are a social species, are there intra colony conflicts too?
Yeah, I mean, so I asked, so the last question is the intra-colony conflict. That is interesting. Probably there is, but there's no study about it. Yeah. So intra-colony conflict is mainly based on the reproductive division of labor. So there's only one individual that is actually laying eggs, and that's the queen. But and the workers cannot mate, but the workers have kind of like reduced ovaries, and apparently, and so there is some kind of, although there is some kind of conflict. And interestingly, Apis dorsata ovaries are larger than those in Apis mellifera, where kind of like inter-colony conflict has been studied in much more detail. So that they have larger ovaries kind of like is already an indication that there might be more conflict. Now, regarding the question of changing the colony. So in Apis mellifera, it's kind of like if you are, or Apis cerana, you are a beekeeper and you have your colonies kind of close to each other, then kind of like how to say, bees can easily also kind of mistakenly fly to a different colony. So then it depends on the colony state whether the bee is let in or whether she is kind of like not kind of like defended. And so if the bee has kind of a nice pollen collected or has a lot of honey, and the colony is searching for food, then maybe the guards are a little bit more permissive and let it in. Interestingly, we are kind of like it's just under, we are writing at the moment an article about that, is that Apis dorsata that are kind of like nesting in aggregations. And that means in a so-called dorsata tree, there can be up to 100 to 200 kind of colonies closely next to each other. So actually the missing their own colony is kind of like a higher probability. And we found in our study that actually the guards of the bees recognize other bees, a bee from a different colony by their odor. And Apis dorsata has kind of like a more complex odor, which means that there can be a larger variation between colonies. So the signal kind of can be easier identified that the bee is coming from a different colony, and kind of like we see a higher aggressiveness of the guards towards bees from a different nest than bees from their own nest. So in the situation of the aggregations, kind of like the colonies are a little bit kind of tending not to get bees from other colonies inside.
We will look forward to that article. Thank you, Professor. Rahul asks, why mellifera species is rare? Do they carry out a sublime role in diversity?
Say this again. What was the question?
The mellifera species, why is it rare? And do they carry out a sublime role in diversity? I'm guessing he is asking, is its role not that important? Is that why it is rare?
No. Okay. So then maybe you got me wrong. Apis mellifera is certainly not rare. So Apis mellifera, the species distribution is from Europe to Africa. It is kind of like it is a honeybee species with the largest distribution area. There's only Apis cerana coming close, which is also showing a large distribution area from kind of like tropical Asia till up kind of like to temperate and cold zone China. Yeah. So it's actually so all the other Asian honeybees, they are mainly they are kind of tropical Asian honeybees. And Apis cerana, as well as Apis mellifera, because one reason because they are cavity nesting, and so they can kind of like better survive in the winter conditions. They have kind of like actually enlarged the distribution area enormously. Apis mellifera was never native to India, right? And it is in so Apis mellifera colonies that are in India kind of go back to importations. And Apis mellifera has actually been and has been exported to all over the world. Yeah, so Apis mellifera, people, if you would show a distribution area, basically people would say, okay, this the natural distribution is Europe and Africa, but now it has by human distribution kind of like put all over the world.
Okay, thank
And
you.
in Apis mellifera, one has to say that except for Africa, Apis mellifera, for example, it's important to understand. Apis mellifera didn't occur naturally in the US. And in the US, kind of like how they say, the honeybee are kind of have been imported by the European settlers. And now it is used for industrial pollination. And that is because you can kind of, because you can keep them in boxes. I mean, the one is kind of the colonies are big. Because you are kind of in boxes, you can transport them. So you can bring them to California when in California the almond trees are flowering. And that is industrial food production. And that you can only do with honeybees because, I mean, this food production in California, it's kind of like, it's till the horizon, there's almond trees. And it's a monoculture that would never kind of, and the monoculture is used by pesticides. So kind of like there are no solitary bees. But you can bring in honeybees for 2 or 3 weeks to pollinate those flowers. Right? In India, we don't have that huge industrial agriculture, maybe in northern India. But how to say, at the moment, Indian agriculture has always these kind of little plots of little farmers. And then because you are in the tropics, you have all these other flowering plants, which kind of like still help that that they are more kind of like wild pollinators.
I'll just add something to what Professor said. In the Native American language, that is what people wrongly call as Red Indians. They call the Apis mellifera as white man's flies. That's how they refer to the honeybee.
Yeah, good. They didn't know that. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, they refer to the Native Americans refer to the mellifera as white man's flies. Parthiban, who's one of our mediators, asked an interesting question: does light pollution cause the bees to overwork? Effect of light pollution on the
Yeah, so
bees.
yeah, so I understand. Yeah, so I mean, it is a question. So what kind of like what I said. So if you're living in an apartment complex where there are honeybee colonies, you sometimes see on the hallways or the gangways, right, where you have light, that in the morning you see all these dead bees, and these bees had been attracted to the lights in the hallways, and then how to say, so they get attracted and caught by the light, and basically they are flying around the light till they die. They cannot kind of escape that light. How much that has an effect on the the number of colonies and kind of the membership, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know. We even don't know whether the killing of colonies, which is extreme, kind of some people say it's I don't know 300 per month or so. We don't even know whether that has a strong effect. So because we don't know, we don't have an estimate of the colony size. That means how many colonies are there in Bangalore, and how many get killed, and how many kind of die of light pollution. We don't have these numbers, so we don't know the effect. Yeah, so and that is a general problem in India. Even kind of like the whole world is talking about the decline of pollinators. We think there is a decline in India, and there are a lot of reasons to think that there's a decline because of pollution, because of pesticide use, but actually we don't have numbers. Yeah, and to show that.
Okay. Uh, we have a question from YouTube. Sayanjit, he asks, how do stingless bees protect their colonies from invaders?
Okay, good question. So, okay, good. Obviously, the stingless bees don't have stings, right? But the stingless bees can bite. So they have strong mandibles, and they would attack you, and I would say they know where they can hurt you. So they would go to your eyelids and maybe to your lips. So in some sense, they know where they can do harm. But I haven't been bitten. I mean, so as I say, I know that people. Um, I think in Canada there's not a word for stinging, and kind of people are always talking about biting, which is not true for honeybees because they are stinging, and but stingless bees are biting.
That is very interesting. Okay. um, uh, Jay Sonwalker, he asks, Sonwalker, is the nocturnal foraging an ecological niche for the species?
So, okay, also a good question. So, and I had a long discussions with my collaborators. So, I think, so how to say, um, so my point was that they are crepuscular and they are not nocturnal. Yeah. So, so, so they are, and that is a niche, kind of how to say. So they are starting to forage earlier than the other honeybee species. Yeah, they can start already when it's dark. Then and they can go kind of further. They can go into the twilight. The Apis mellifera, Apis cerana might be a little bit different, but Apis mellifera we know they are stopping way before sunset. So and that is a niche, and so it would be interesting to see whether actually, and we didn't have the data, whether the foraging activity is higher in the morning twilight than the evening twilight. For the morning twilight, you could likely make that point that the plants are producing nectar during the night, and kind of like in the morning hours, the nectar volume is higher than during the day, and particularly in tropical areas where it is hot, kind of like hot wood can also lead to evaporation of the water and the nectar, maybe harder to get. I think it's certainly a niche, and it is the twilight. So in addition to what you can collect during the day, you can also collect in the twilight, and you can collect from flowers that before the others are visiting.
Thank you. And apologies to Jay. She had a good question.
Uh,
Um, okay, people are now asking, is the bite stronger than the sting? Thanks, Jaydeep.
I don't know. I haven't, as I said, I haven't bitten. So
Jaydeep is a mediator. Probably he would like to volunteer for this experiment if he's up for it to find out if the bite is stronger or the sting is stronger. Uh, Axel, we are at the end of the questions for this session. We have a few more questions, but I think we'll have it at the end of
kind of
the
like
part
so
three.
if I can go on and on, I kind of like
Yes.
I make it a little bit faster, and it's also a shorter version.
Yeah. Okay.
So, okay, observing the annual life cycle of apistosata colonies as a first step to conserve them. As I said, so if we want, and I think we have to conserve them, we need really to understand their biology. And as I said, kind of like the biology is not studied at all. And 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 what is even more kind of like what to say more problematic, you have seen that I showed that Ellison came, an American student came to India to study the behavior of apistosata. So actually, all good studies on apistosata are mainly done by Westerners coming to India or coming to Thailand. And it is, I think, it's a pity that that the Asians don't have established a good research on their own honeybees. And this is something that has to happen in the next years. And how to say, so you have to really kind of like start with just observing. And I have a student, Rajat, who started monitoring. So, and that means kind of like just looking whether there are colonies there or not. And I think it was in 2019, we were asked by interested apartment owners, our residents in an apartment complex called Patia City in northern Bangalore, that they had kind of like dorsata, and here you see a photo of dorsata nesting, and I think it's the ninth floor or kind of like 10th floor, even higher. And as it usually is that apartment management, it gets called by the residents, and then they call pest management, and they kill these bees. There were kind of like some concerned residents, and they got to know that there was a bee researcher at NCBS, and they asked us whether I can come and kind of help them what to do. So, and I asked them, okay, if I'm coming and helping you, it kind of takes some time, and we would like to monitor this. And my student Rajat did that. And here you can see it's a kind of like a 10 tower complex. And yeah, so it's kind of like even, so the numbers are the floors. So it's even like 26 floors. That's really high. And kind of like how to say, you see that all these kind of like symbols are nesting sites. And the yellow ones are kind of nesting sites where he saw several times coming new colonies. So the yellow ones are the preferred nesting sites in our terminology. And if these are kind of like occupied, kind of like bees are nesting at other sites. So, and what he did is, so he kind of went there, kind of totally simple. He went there every month and kind of counted the number of colonies that he found. And this is, oh, it started in 2018, in April 2018, then whole 2019, and then in March 2020, he had to stop because of the pandemic. If you see this, you see a nice cycling, and kind of like the total number of colonies kind of goes down during the monsoon time. And this is a phenomenon that had been shown before. And kind of like everyone knows it, during monsoon, the colonies are gone. And we think that they do a monsoon season migration. We don't know where they are going. And then after the monsoon, they are coming back. And then you see kind of like a strong increase in November and December at this nesting site. And then it kind of goes a little bit down in February, March and April, it goes up again. There's a flowering season, I think, in November, December, and there's a flowering season in March and April. Now, what no one did before was actually Rashad was looking kind of like counting the arriving and departing colonies per month. And what you see here is that over the year, actually, colonies are coming and colonies are going. So, and that is something that we didn't expect to find. And that is because when you are just looking at it, you're always saying that, oh, there are colonies, and then you don't. But if you now kind of like do it more closer and you count them, you see, so for example, that's interesting here, the monsoon time. That's clearly, you see the orange one as the departing one. So more colonies are leaving. But during monsoon, also some colonies are coming. And we also saw that not all colonies are going. Apparently, some of the colonies are staying. And kind of like how to say, I want to compare that with, for example, bird migration in England, kind of like the birds are leaving England before the winter and flying to Spain. And kind of like in recent time, kind of like there's a population of these of a species that is going down to Spain, but because kind of like the weather kind of changed in England, some kind of like stayed in England. And then we see, we see then after the monsoon an increase of the proportion of arriving colonies. And then we see here an interesting kind of peak in April of coming bees. And we think that this has also something to do with swarming, so with the reproduction of the bees. So kind of like the reproduction of bee colonies is based in that the colonies are split, and that is what we call swarming. So, and I have observed it here at Mandara housing. I found 2 or 3 new swarms in April. And swarms, you identify them because they are smaller than more longer resident colonies. So now, and if you look at the duration of residence, actually it kind of like most of the colonies are only staying for 2 months. So and for 2 or 3 months, and they are not staying the whole season. So we think that actually apistosata is more migratory than we thought before. They do a long-term seasonal migration during the monsoon time, but actually they are changing, and we are kind of like, we for ourselves call it, they are recollecting, they are relocating the nests. And this relocation of nests can be a consequence of that reduce of food availability in that area where they were nesting, or kind of like that the nests were kind of like infested by pest insects, and they are just leaving the nest. So so based on our data, we kind of like prepared a first model for the annual life cycle. And let me start here in June, September. So in October, the colonies, October, November, December, the colonies are coming back from their seasonal migration. And as I said, we don't know to which area they are migrating. There are different hypotheses. Some people kind of say they're going to the Western Ghats. What we know about monsoon migration is that the butterflies do a monsoon migration, and they are following the monsoon from west to east. So if honeybees do something similar, actually then they should kind of migrate to the east, and that means maybe Andhra Pradesh or Tamil Nadu might be kind of like too dry, but I don't know, we don't know. So they are coming back, and then they have to build a comb, and then if they have built a comb, they are kind of collecting food, protein, and they are producing workers. And then kind of like they can do this for 1 or 2 months, and then kind of like for whatever reason, they decide that is, they want to go some other place, so they are relocating the nest. Then they have to build a nest again, rear brood, and during March and May, kind of like between February, March, May, where kind of like there's the bigger kind of flowering season, and now kind of like is strong April season. We see that we think that the colony does swarm reproduction. For swarming and for reproduction, they need to produce sexuals, and kind of young virgin queens and drones. And the drones are indicated here as these dark Darth Vader kind of figures. And then the colony can reproduce kind of 2 or 3 kind of new colonies that then can kind of like start this process of kind of producing workers. But then in June, they are starting to prepare for the migration. And as a starting for, I mean, any kind of migration, even the nest relocation, you have to stop reproducing workers first. So the queen stops laying eggs. You wait till all kind of the brood become adults, and then can join you on the relocation or on the seasonal migration. And kind of last year, we even kind of like found out that it's probably not that all colonies are leaving Bangalore. Some kind of may stay. And one colony that we observed last year, kind of that had stayed, that actually produced sexuals in October and December, and kind of like had, so we have a second swarm season. This is totally different from Apis mellifera. And if you compare this annual life cycle with that of Apis mellifera, and so it appears that this life cycle is actually an adaptation to a tropical season. So here, this is Apis mellifera, the European Apis mellifera, the temperate one. And Apis mellifera scutellata is from Africa, it's a tropical one. And here are some characters of their life cycle. They have Apis mellifera in Europe has only a few swarms. In the tropics, they have many swarms, and even 2 swarming seasons. That's for Apis dorsata the same. They show a migration. They even abscond, and that's called absconding. That is what we kind of call frequent nest locations. Apis mellifera in the temperate zone is not absconding. Low kind of like Apis mellifera has large nectar stores in the temperate zone, whereas Apis mellifera in the tropics has low nectar stores. And the large nectar stores has something to do because this temperate zone populations of Apis mellifera, they have to survive the winter. Because, so how to say, and they're surviving the winter on nectar stores. And this is why Apis mellifera is Apis mellifera from the temperate zone, European species, populations. And these are the ones that have been introduced to India. Because kind of like large nectar stores means large honey. But these kind of like, so these are kind of like, they are better at collecting honey. And then they're less aggressive, and these are highly aggressive. So what I want to say is that the annual life cycle of Apis dorsata is not species specific. It's actually kind of like probably an adaptation to tropical environments where there is always some food. There's not a phase where they don't have any food. There's always some food, but so that you don't need to, kind of, for example, collect large nectar stores. Okay, so so this is the data from Rajat are only from one nesting site, and we actually plan to do it for many different nesting sites in Bangalore, and this is a Google map from the housing complex where I'm living. It's kind of the NCBS faculty and staff housing complex in Sri Lanka. And for whatever reason, we have a lot of honeybee colonies, and this is 16 just measured in April. And I have kind of started doing it every month. And we see here kind of like a little bit different, also and kind of like a little bit delayed in August, September, October, the colonies leave. And then we saw a strong increase in March. And this is kind of like, I just also go each month just looking and counting. And we want to do this for whole Bangalore to get an estimate of how many colonies we have and and how their life cycle is at different parts of Bangalore. And we have already kind of like, so this is Mandara housing, this is Matia city, this is somewhere in south of Bangalore, what's it called, where the big companies are. And this is Bangalore rural area where we kind of started also. There's some kind of different trees. And we want to see whether this annual life pattern is similar or a little bit different. And maybe we can even kind of see whether colonies are going different places during the year in Bangalore. And we want to do this as a citizen science project, and we are developing at the moment a smartphone app so that lay people can observe the colonies and can send us the data. It is different from from most citizen science projects, where you kind of like, how to say, where they ask people, okay, if you're kind of on a Sunday walk and you see some insect, photograph it and send it to us, and we tell you which insect that is. For our kind of study, we will need interested, persistent project collaborators, because we need to observe the colonies over at least a year or 2 years or 3 years. And maybe that can be done by school classes or by residents, because only over the years we get that data set. Yeah? And kind of like even kind of counting numbers of pollinators, that needs to be done over several years to see whether there's a decline or not. So it's not rocket science. It's simple, but it has to be done. And it has a kind of strong impact on whatever kind of like in monitoring our environment, in seeing whether something is going wrong. And we as humans have to work against it. So that's my last slide. And I want to hint you at two websites. One is with a group of colleagues from different universities over India, from Kolkata, from Trivandrum, Hema Somanathan, and from Hyderabad, we are forming an Indian Pollinator Initiative, which is a scientist initiative, to get to collaborate the scientists in India who are working on pollinators. We have done an online seminar series that you can kind of see at on YouTube. It's called, and if you just Google YouTube Indian Pollinator Initiative, you will get to that. These are kind of like more hardcore scientist talks, but kind of maybe there's something that's of interest to you. And the Indian Pollinator Initiative will also kind of like publish a webpage soon. And then I've been collaborating, or kind of like the documentary movie director, Rajani Mani, kind of got in contact with me and other bee scientists. And she's preparing a documentary, a movie about apistosata colonies in Bangalore. And that the title of the movie is Colonies in Conflict. She's at the moment doing her last kind of recording, and then she's going in what she calls post-production to generate. But on this webpage, Colonies in Conflict, and this is a page of the webpage, you can see already a trailer. And I'm hoping that, I mean, okay, I'm also kind of like so mindset, but I'm hoping that this movie can make a difference and can make people aware of the life of the apistosata, and that we have to reduce killing these colonies in the Indian cities. So that, and thank you for your attention. Betty?
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for that very, very interesting and very ecologically important talk. Also, to those participants, I have put in the link to the YouTube channel which Professor talked about, the Indian Pollinator Initiative. It's there in the chat, and I have also given you the link to coloniesandconflict.com. And also, let me also take this opportunity to tell you that they are looking for funding, so they are on Keto, and they are trying to crowdsource the funding for the movie Colonies and Conflict. So it is, I just checked it out. They are still active. Please do consider supporting the cause.
That is nice. And of course, I think that Rajani would welcome any kind of contribution.
Yeah,
The positive news is that I think she has almost the money. So can, I mean, there was a phase where she hadn't much money and then the pandemic came. But I think she got support from a philanthropist. And it seems that she can finish her documentary in the next few months.
fantastic. That's really good news. Axel, just a few questions. We have uh,
Yeah.
interesting question from Rahul. He says that queens are diploid, which have 32 chromosomes, and drones are haploid, which have 16 chromosomes. And is it because of this haplodiploidy that queens are not considered drones, or the gender dysmorphia? Is that because of the haplodiploidy?
Wait a minute. Um,
Okay, so the
no, so
question.
it doesn't have to do anything with haploid diploid, right?
Yeah.
In sexual systems, you have something that you call a male and something that you call a female. And the female is kind of producing the oocyte and the male is producing the sperm. And kind of like how to say, and that is how you can kind of like produce variation, right? So I mean, there's something wrong with the question.
Aha.
So
We
the workers are also diploid. It's kind of like so, and the drones are haploid, but that is kind of like that. The haploid uh, system has only little to do with why the males become males. There's a kind of mechanism, other mechanism that kind of decides kind of like whether the egg becomes a male or a female.
okay.
In addition,
Uh, from YouTube, Krishna Sharma asks, the worker honeybees never breed, but when the queen bee passes away, who is chosen to be as queen? Are they the next descendants of the queen bee who are chosen as a queen? Is it hierarchical? Is the question. I think
no.
it's not.
So
Yeah.
so the terminology queen and workers. I mean queen. The terminology queen is certainly a misnomer. So in a colony, most decisions are done by the workers. The queen is important because she's the only one. She's a single individual, right? And that is producing the eggs and is kind of like maintaining the reproduction, right? So it is kind of like important for the survival of the colony, but the queen is not doing the decisions. So one thing is that so we don't know about the Asian species. We know that from Apis mellifera. That in Apis mellifera, so the rule is that queens can live 3 years. So if the queen is getting old and kind of like her reproductive activity goes down, the workers can decide to produce a new queen. Yeah. So and the workers do this decision because so the queen is genetically similar to the workers, and it's basically based on different kind of food the larvae gets. That kind of like the larvae develops into a queen or a worker, and the one who is feeding the larvae are the workers. So and the queen cells are different. So the workers kind of like may decide, okay, we need a new queen, or kind of like in doing general reproduction, swarming, kind of like how to say, someone kind of like, and this is distributed. So we think it's not the whole colony. There might be an elite, kind of like an elite, don't take it correctly. There is a specific group that, and we don't know who that is, that makes a decision, okay, so the colony is big enough, so we have enough numbers so that we can divide. And then they are kind of like, first thing is that they are building drone cells, and then they are building queen cells. And the queen kind of like goes in. The queen can kind of like, so decide, the queen can make the decision, do I lay an egg that is not fertilized, that's haploid, or do I lay an egg that's fertilized and diploid, right? But kind of like how the workers would bring the queen to the queen cell, and then the queen lays a diploid egg, and then this larvae is raised to a queen. In the case of and larvae, so um, so larvae are B potential, so to speak, in the first few days. So when a queen suddenly kind of like passes away or is getting lost, there will be still larvae that are kind of like in that time period where they can be made to queens. And that is then kind of like emergent queens, kind of like called. Of course, is it kind of like, if that is not happening, right, then probably the colony will disintegrate. And so if there's no queen, the colony will disintegrate. And kind of like workers and workers that are capable of laying eggs. I mean, these eggs are not fertilized, but as I said, they still have a little bit ovaries. The workers would start kind of laying eggs, but in a kind of like diffuse way, chaotic way. But the colony would die. But most of the time, kind of like how to say, they still have the probability to to have a larvae that is still kind of they can make a queen.
Okay, just a couple of more questions and we are done. Uh, Jay, she asks another interesting question. How do you identify returning colonies? Is tagging or color coding possible?
No, unfortunately, probably not. So, so the question kind of like is, are kind of like how to say. So what we have kind of like Mandara housing complex. During monsoon they are going, and then they are coming back, and then kind of like I find at the same kind of like balconies, I find colonies. Now the question is that the same colony or not?
Ah,
Yeah, so so how to say, there's a problem. So how to say, so we know that it does not need to be the same, but it can be. And there have been like, I think 15 years or maybe, yeah, so early 2000, there have been two studies that tried to use genetics to identify whether the returning colonies are kind of related to the ones that left. And that you can do kind of by kind of like using genetics. You cannot kind of like, so because you cannot do, so it's difficult to get the queen. So you can, and then kind of doing genetics on the queen. So an elephant you can kind of cut a little bit piece, and then you can have the DNA. And then you cannot do that with a queen, right? So you cannot identify with the same queen. But these people did it kind of by using workers and inferring the genetics of the mother queen, and then kind of say that were they related. And they said that it's related. Yeah.
oh,
And so the idea is that it is that dorsata migrations are similar to bird migrations or these butterfly migrations, that they are kind of going somewhere, we don't know where, and they are coming back to the same site. Yeah. But we don't ask me anything about the mechanism. So this is now studied in monarch butterflies. We have some ideas, but we don't know. But I think kind of dorsata would be a suitable object to do that. And the first thing would be actually to identify where they are going during the monsoon. And I think that that might not be so difficult a question, but no one has really started doing that. Yeah? And how to say, so we are in discussions with some researchers. So so the first thing that you can do is trying to map flowering seasons in India, right? So to say, if in monsoon in kind of flowering goes down in Bangalore, where is now flowering plants, right? And then that could be a candidate destination area. Yeah. And then the idea would be also, if they're in the destination area, you look whether now kind of during monsoon, actually the number of colonies are increasing, right? So something like that. And then and if you know if you have an idea about the general direction, then maybe you can try to do genetics. So I mean we can color mark them, but so to say so we can color mark bees and then we find them in the colony, right? But color marking doesn't help when you don't know where the colony flies, right? And because you still have to find the colony first and then see, oh, that was the one I and kind of like and you cannot add um, uh, um, radio frequency responders as you can do with birds.
Very interesting. Okay, this is a question from me, Professor. Uh, I remember reading about a very interesting democratic process that happens in bees called range voting. Range voting. I read about this where honeybees hold kind of an election system to determine where the next nest should be
Yeah.
built, and they ask everybody, and if only more than 90% of the bees all say we can build a nest here, then they go ahead with that, which is a very high democratic system which humans can't even come close to.
Yeah, so it's not quite as you described. I mean, so it is again. It is an elite group again, which we call nest site scouts.
Okay.
Yeah? And I cannot tell you maybe how many percentage of the colony is, but it's
Okay.
probably only 5 or 10% of the colony.
Oh, okay.
Yeah? So how to say? So the question is always where is the 90% coming? So, but how to
Ah,
say? So the decision is probably that how to say. So let's say kind of like let's say I don't know 100 nest site scouts go out, yeah, and then these nest site scouts find 5 interesting nest sites. And then they are coming back and they are advertising similar with the same dance, um, the distance and direction of that nest site. And uh, uh, the how to say, and the scouts basically have an innate image of what is a good nest site. Yeah. So and kind of like that is the size, and so it can kind of like, for example, it can estimate the size of a cavity. Yeah. And kind of like how to say, so it has a kind of an idea about how good that is. So and depending on the goodness of the nest site, it dances for longer. Yeah.
oh,
So and kind of like and it dances for longer, and it dances maybe in a higher intensity, right? Kind of like this reguling is kind of like a little bit more intense, and so it attracts. So these scouts that are going out, they are also looking at the others, and they are looking whether their dances are attracting other scouts. Yeah. So in kind of like how to say, I think mine is good. So I'm going back, and then actually I don't have many followers. So I'm saying, okay, good. I don't right, and then this scout is going. Going to, actually to another scout that is kind of like more maybe more active scouting. So and then it's flying out and looking at that nest site. So over time, uh, dances for lower quality nests gets eradicated. And then over time, kind of like these scouts are kind of like almost kind of like dancing for the same. And they can, and that I'm at the moment not firm in whether kind of like there's also an interaction at the nest site, right? So whether kind of like trophollaxis or something like that. But how to say, and if these now these elite kind of have decided for this process, then this elite is starting to arouse the colony to leave the site. And that is a process of 20 minutes or something like that. So, and they are running over the colony, and then the colony is starting. And for Apis mellifera, they are saying that these scouts are also guiding the cloud of bees flying in the way that kind of like how to say. So
Like
actually,
shepherding.
I've never seen a swarm in Europe, but I've seen 2 swarms of dorsata here. So how to say, because kind of like you have that in your daily life, you see actually more honeybee biology in your daily life than in Europe. In Europe, the honeybees are at beekeepers or wherever. So it is like a cloud of bees. And the idea in mellifera is that these scouts are flying with high speed through the cloud in one direction. And that gives the direction for the cloud. Yeah. You understand? So it's a cloud and kind of like what I'm saying. Then you have kind of like starfighters that are with high speed flying through the cloud,
Yeah, yeah.
which then kind of like informs kind of the others in which direction they might fly. That at least is the idea.
It's like one of those shepherd dogs who run through the lambs to just show all the lambs where to go,
Yeah,
the sheep to
yeah,
go,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
there's one dog zipping through the middle, and all of them have to follow to go to the corral. Oh, that's interesting.
So kind of like how to say, honeybees are interesting. Actually, for collective behavior, they are certainly interesting. So, and this nest site scouting is actually has been studied in great detail because you can easily make a colony to search for a nest site. You can kind of right, and then you can do many behaviors. So, kind of like how to say, it is hard to induce building a queen cell and observing processes that lead to queen cell and kind of right. So because then you have to remove the queen or whatever. Yeah. There might be many decision processes that are totally interesting, but you cannot kind of generate an experiment to study that, right? Because you need repeatability, right? And you need to induce this process to observe it. Yeah. But and I think and people do that. Um, there's more research in ants on that because kind of like you can have ants with smaller nests where you kind of like how to
Yeah,
say have 50 ants and maybe then they are so small that you can put them under a camera and you can do that. Yeah.
very interesting. Okay, the last question is a very interesting question. Chandrasekhar asks, I face a bee problem in my building. It's very frequent. Who should we be calling or contacting for safe removal of hives and non-intrusive handling of the colonies?
Send me an email. So I kind of like I can get you in contact with the beekeepers or people that can remove it. And so let me kind of explain what is done. Um, so the person will smoke the colony. So the workers are flying all up. And then he will cut the comb and remove the comb. And then the colony will come back because how to say, they are flying around in the air and they are coming back to the site where they expect their nest. And then there's a comb is not there. So kind of like how to say, they got depressed, so to speak. Okay, that's kind of like something happened to her. So, and they will stay there for a few days and then they will fly away. Yeah. So there's 2 things why people prefer pest management. So pest management immediately kills the bees. The apartment owner sees that the bees are dead, problem solved. Yeah. So with this method where you smoke the colony, kind of like, and then cut the comb, the bees are there, still there for 2 or 3 days, right? And kind of like how to say, have an expensive apartment. The person is calling management, and then they say, oh, the colonies are still there. So you have to kind of like a little bit understand about the life. So that is so then you remove the comb, but kind of like the colony is still alive. And the important is that that so as I said, that they have preferred nesting sites. So if you had, or if you have a colony, you remove it, you already know that your balcony is a preferred nesting site. So probability that kind of next year or even earlier, you get another colony. So it is important. So how to say, so in that sense, killing is totally short-sighted, right? So they are doing it always the same time, but they kind of like, I guess it's like cockroaches. You have them and then you ask someone, and so my advice is that if you have it, you have a preferred nesting site. It means that you are facing the problem again. So you have to do something to the ceiling of your balcony so that they cannot attach the comb. A simple thing would be you can have a net or how to say, you put a little something underneath your ceiling, like a mesh or like a net. That might be 3 or 4, 5 centimeters below the ceiling. Then they cannot attach the wax, right? And I think that you can do that in a way that still your balcony looks nice. Yeah. So but how to say, you have to do that. So how to say, most people don't do that. I know that if you do that, it works. And I have nothing against killing once or kind of like removing once, but then please do something. For wait a minute, and for an apartment building, this is a complex issue because kind of like how to say, so your balcony was first preference, and now how to say, kind of like still your apartment building is attractive. So what is then the second best option? Yeah. So so there's two things. So we need to have more people that can remove colonies without killing them, and the people need to know who are these people. So okay, next disadvantage is that the people that remove safely these colonies, they ask for more money than pest management. Right? I mean, how to say, it comes down always to money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because of course, kind of like how to say, the procedure that they do, kind of like pest management can have kind of like maybe even kind of, a sprayer, and you just spray 5 minutes and it's done. Kind of like smoking, cutting the comb is a longer work. And sometimes these people go close to the colony. So, but how to say, kind of like how to say, if you are middle class living in a good apartment complex, I mean, you have the money, spend it and kind of like have a good conscience, right, that you did that. But how to say, so so the one thing is that apartment buildings are highly attractive. And we think that because dorsata needs a lot of food, if there is a lot of flowering around it, kind of like that makes your apartment complex attractive. In some sense, you have to learn with the bees. You have to learn to live with the bees, right? I mean, I cannot understand people that are killing the bees, but they don't do anything against the pigeons. So the pigeons are kind of way more. I mean, how to say, so the pigeons can transfer infections, right? Viruses, the bird flu. The pigeons are dirty. Honeybees are not that dirty, right? And kind of like how to say, so how to say, because you cannot get rid, you have to learn to live with it. For example, kind of, they are not flying all nights. I mean, it's kind of like in the summer important, and then they are attracted to these very light bulbs. So how to say, and if you want to get rid of them, so for example, okay, I'm living alone in my apartment, but then if I'm opening a window, or if there is some openings in the window, I switch on the light in a room where I'm not in. And kind of because the bees are guided by the light, they just go in that room where there's a light. So you can also kind of like, how to say, one can also play with let's say, One can divert the bees by going into the apartment by have a light at the balcony, and then they are staying at the balcony and they are not coming in. Or kind of like if you are opening your balcony doors, kind of have a lower yellowish light on. That is too low. They are not coming for that. It's mainly these what are these called? These long
The incandescent
fluorescent,
lights, white
the
light,
fluorescent
incandescent. Yeah.
lights, right? So that are attractive. Yeah, but I kind of like how to say I'm always kind of trying to give advice, right? I kind of like how to say I think one should reduce it. Um, uh, I can understand if people don't want their colonies on the balconies, then one can remove them without killing them. But then one should also do something to the balcony. Okay, I could talk about that kind of like on.
Would you be comfortable as to how to people can reach you? Are you on Twitter or
Yeah, no, I'm not on Twitter.
but
I,
website?
you can give them my email address.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
So
we shall do that. Yeah,
and I can so it is sometimes it is actually that we are searching for colonies
yeah,
to for our own experiments, and we are coming and we can remove the colony. If we do it, you don't have to pay. But as I say, we are not a business. So I'm not kind of saying that kind of like don't call us 1,000 times. We only kind of like only need one, two, or three colonies.
yeah,
But we have we know people that can remove it
yeah,
again, and so I think it's by Indian standards, it's not cheap. I think it's kind of can be up to 2,000 rupees. And how to say, but again, also you can bargain.
yeah, yeah. Of course.
So it depends a little bit on it, right? But
I will make sure that people who need to know this can actually. Professor, quickly, can I just stop your sharing so that I can start sharing my screen? Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, cool. And that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Professor. That is really, really very informative, and we are getting lots of good feedback from the participants as well. Thank you so much, and for patiently answering all the questions. And we could genuinely understand the passion that you have for the subject, and we loved the amount of information that you've shared. Thank you so much.
yeah,
Thank you to all the participants who were there till the end. Thank you to all those who are watching on YouTube for making this. You can follow, you can go to the NCBS website where you can find out more about the work that Axel's lab is doing. So
yeah, you can
thank yeah.
put in honeybee lab NCBS. Then you we have a separate web page.
Honeybee Lab in CPS, it is. So you can figure out Dr. Axel's work. As for Cosmic Zoom, we are coming close to the end of the exhibition, the events that are happening. The website will be up. You can watch it always. And the moderator sessions which happen at 10:30 a.m., which is a lot of fun, very engaging. It's completely free. Is completely every day at 10:30. All you have to do is just register on a Zoom link, and you can go to all our social media campaigns like on Twitter, Facebook, and Insta, and you can find out how to register for that. Come as a class, come as a group. It's a lot of fun working with the mediators. Some of them who are there on the call right now. It's at 10:30 a.m. every day till the end of the month. But there are only two sessions left for Cosmic Zoom events. That is tomorrow. I will be talking to Dipani Sutaria, who is an ecologist, and we'll be talking about whales and dolphins with specific reference to humpback whales in the Arabian Sea. So I'm really excited about that. And on 18th April, the final talk, of course, has to be about the Big Bang to the present day. We're talking about everything in cosmology with Professor Tirthankar Roy Chowdhury. And I am very, very excited to say that it will be a special edition which will be moderated by Professor Rajesh Gopakumar himself, the director of the ICTS. It's going to be really exciting, and that will be the end of all the sessions we've had. And as you can see, we've had some amazing sessions, and every single one of them that you can see right now are available on the website. You can just click on the YouTube link and you can watch if you missed out something. And as you can see, Professor Axel's YouTube is also there. It'll be up soon. It's already there. An edited version will be up soon, and you can watch that as well. All that remains for me to say is thank you, Professor, for spending your time and for this amazing talk. I've really, really enjoyed this. Looking forward to more interactions in the future. As of now, I will wish everybody a wonderful good evening, good night, and remember, yeah, next time you see a honeybee scouting out, it might be a scout which is looking for a new place, and just watch it. And might you might have to mail NGBS and tell them, listen, I found something, you might be interested. There's lots of things to look out for, and we have to be thankful to the multiple species of bees for the amazing nature that's around us. So thank you, Professor, for opening eyes, and
Okay.
thank you, ICTS, for this opportunity for to do this. And I will see you all in the next session. Till then, this is me, Bertie Ashley, saying good evening and good night. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks.
ICTs, you can stop the live stream. Participants feel free to leave the meeting. Yeah. Thank you, Jai. Thank you, Rahul. Oh, Discord server. Okay. Thank you, Chandrasekhar. I think we're good. Yay. Gopi, kadai mudiruma.
Ah, yes.
Uh,
That's
Thank you,
all.
Anupam. I think we're good. Which Rahul is this?
Yeah, thanks. Gobi, you asked me to stay back.
Uh, yes.